George's loop. The day begins with soft morning light falling on George's pillow. He wakes up, yawns, and grabs his old stuffed dinosaur. Going down the stairs, he sees Mama and Papa. Peppa accidentally spills juice on him. Everyone laughs, but George frowns. After breakfast, they go for a walk. The weather is cloudy, and there are almost no people in the park. George slides down the slide, but suddenly he sees a black silhouette in the distance. He blinks. The silhouette disappears. On the way home, a black cat runs by, and Papa jokes that it's good luck. When George returns to his room, the lights in the house start flickering. He notices that the closet door is slightly open, even though it was closed in the morning. George closes it and lies in bed. Suddenly, a creak. The closet opens again. A shadow with red eyes appears, taking a step forward. George shuts his eyes and wakes up again. But the day begins the same. Spilled juice. Peppa smiling, everything repeats. George starts to check how everything happens the same. He tears the napkin, arranges the books in the wrong order, but the day always ends the same. Creak, closet, breathing. On the third or fourth cycle, he decides to hide under the bed, but he sees the shadow leaning over and looking at him. He closes his eyes, but it doesn't help. Everything disappears for only a second, and it starts again. Over time, George stops being afraid. He stops hiding. When the closet opens again, he just watches. The shadow approaches, its eyes glimmering. It leans in, but disappears in the rustle of air. The next morning, everything is different. Peppa doesn't spill juice. Papa plays dinosaurs with George. The closet is empty. George decides to check it and opens the door. Inside, only neatly folded t-shirts. He smiles, but when he closes the closet, he notices a new drawing on the floor. It's an image of that same monster, but with one difference. Now it's not smiling. It's holding George's paw, and George looks at it with empty eyes. The closet closes with a heavy creak. George doesn't move. Everything becomes dark. The dollhouse one morning, as the sun peeked through the window, Peppa opened her eyes and immediately noticed something new in her room. In the corner, where nothing had been before, now stood a dollhouse. It was large, nearly half her height, with neatly carved windows, tiny doors, and a little roof. But the strangest thing wasn't its sudden appearance. The dollhouse was an exact replica of their home. Every detail was in place. A miniature sofa in the living room, a tiny table in the kitchen, even 2 small beds in the bedroom. But what really caught Peppa's attention were the dolls. Inside stood small figurines that looked just like her family. Mummy Pig stood in the kitchen next to a tiny teapot. Daddy Pig sat in a chair in front of a tiny television. In the bedroom, 2 figurines lay in bed. One looked exactly like George, and the other looked exactly like her. Peppa hesitantly ran a finger over the face of her tiny double. It was smooth, cold, and lacked the softness of a normal toy. The doll's eyes were black, empty. Something about its gaze made Peppa uneasy. All day, she kept coming back to check on the dollhouse, watching for any changes. She moved the dolls around, placing them in different spots, but each time she looked away, it seemed like they returned to their original positions. Night fell. Before going to bed, Peppa glanced at the dollhouse one last time. Everything was in place. She pulled her blanket over herself and closed her eyes. Then she heard a soft click, like the sound of a tiny door opening. Peppa sat up suddenly. The room was dark, but the moonlight was enough to illuminate the corners. She looked at the dollhouse. Her heart skipped a beat. The figurine that had been lying in bed earlier was now standing at the door of the tiny bedroom. Peppa couldn't look away. A chill ran down her spine. The doll was moving. Slowly, its head began to turn. Peppa's breath caught in her throat. She clutched the blanket tightly, wanting to look away, but she couldn't. The doll's eyes were empty. Then, a quiet creak echoed through the room. Not from the dollhouse, from the real door of her bedroom. She turned her head slowly. The door was open. The hallway was dark, and in the doorway stood a figure. Peppa felt her entire body freeze. The figure stepped forward. Moonlight revealed its face. It was her, but not exactly. The eyes of the other Peppa were black, empty, like the doll's. It smiled. Peppa wanted to scream, but she couldn't. The next morning, the only thing left in the room was a single dollhouse, and inside it, a small figurine. It looked exactly like Peppa, but now its eyes were black too. The closet. The day was ordinary. After dinner, Peppa and George went up to their room as usual. George quickly fell asleep, snuggling his plush dinosaur, while Peppa played for a little longer, scattering her toys across the floor. The nightlight cast a soft glow over the room. The moon shone outside the window. Everything was peaceful. Before going to bed, Peppa decided to tidy up. She gathered her toys and opened the closet to put them away. The darkness inside seemed a little deeper than usual, as if the shelves extended further than she remembered. She placed her plush teddy bear inside, and at that moment something grabbed her hand. A sudden yank, and Peppa disappeared into the closet. At first, there was complete silence. Then she felt herself falling. Her body sank into something soft, like thick, invisible fog. But as soon as she tried to move, the space around her felt solid. She stood up. Absolute darkness. No closet, no room, no light. Peppa called for Mummy. Her voice was swallowed by endless emptiness. She took a step forward. The floor beneath her was cold. But was this her room? Her closet? She kept walking. Time passed. Minutes? Hours? She had no idea. The darkness never changed, never shifted. Only silence remained. But soon the silence was broken. Somewhere behind her, a faint sound echoed, like someone else had just taken a step. Peppa froze. A step, another. But when she turned around, there was only nothing. Something was here. She could feel it. It never moved when she looked. She ran. Light. Suddenly, a dim glow flickered ahead. Distant. Weak. Peppa sprinted toward it, her heart pounding. The darkness around her tightened, closing in. But she didn't stop. In the next moment, she tumbled back into her room. Peppa lay on the floor in front of the open closet. Everything was in its place. George was asleep. The nightlight glowed softly. The moon shone outside. She breathed heavily. Was it just a dream? But something felt wrong. She stood up. Her movements felt strange, as if her body didn't fully obey her. Slowly, she turned toward George's bed. He was sleeping, unaware of anything. Peppa smiled, but it was not her smile.